What's up, guys? Welcome back to Everyday Money. Now, if you guys want to grow your wealth and maybe get off of the corporate rat race, a lot of times people will think about investing into real estate in order to get long-term income going on, to supplement their current income, to build wealth through appreciation and take advantage of various tax deductions that real estate investors get. But before you get into doing long-term rentals like your typical single-family homes or apartments, just being a landlord, you may want to consider getting into short-term rentals like Airbnb, VRBO type things, and that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. But if you guys have never been here before, this is your first time, what we do around here is we talk about growing multiple streams of income, some passive, some active, some semi-active, in order to grow your wealth, to increase your success, put you on the road to financial freedom. That's kind of my three buzzwords that I use around here. But the deal is to get you to financial freedom so that you're not trading your time for money. So if you're interested in that, smash that like button, hit the subscribe button, and I want to talk to you today about the three reasons why I think that it is beneficial to invest in short-term rentals versus the traditional long-term rental. So guys, we started, and when I say we, I have a couple of business partners that I work with to invest in real estate. When we started in real estate back in 2013, we were coming out of the recession, and we had built our business model on the traditional landlord-tenant type of thing. We were buying single-family homes, we were buying apartment buildings, and we were using the equity that we would build up from one, we would sell it, and then we would move on to a bigger or nicer or a property that has more units, sort of like a monopoly type of thing, where you start off in the blues, you go to the oranges, you work your way around to the yellows, and over time you build wealth and you get more financially free than you were before. And the long-term landlord, long-term rent model is a very tried and true way of doing things. You get some, income, and it pays the bills, and it pays you, and it can make you wealthy. And a lot of people have done it before. It's one of the ways that a lot of folks have become millionaires over time. But there were some downsides to it, and a lot of it stems from these three things. And it is the amount of income that you make, the amount of fun that you're having while you're doing it, because I also like to have fun as well. This is not just a stodgy how to make money and watch your bank account grow. I like to have fun. And the traditional landlording operation wasn't terribly fun over the long term. And then the third reason is that there is a difference between tenants and guests that is very important, and it gives you a lot more control over your property if you are a short-term renter versus a long-term landlord type of deal. So let's get into the first one, which is really for most people that are going to be doing investments, the most important, the income side of things. So with a long-term rental, you have your traditional lease, and it's usually 12 months. It can be any other thing that you really want to agree to with the tenant, but it is typically either a 12-month agreement or it is a month-to-month agreement. A lot of times those 12-month agreements will automatically roll into a month-to-month agreement unless there is something else that is agreed to by the tenant and the landlord. And the thing is that is stable income. It is boring, but it pays the bills, and it will make you some money at the end of the month. And that's where we were. We had this boring stream of income. Now, boring is good in both ways. There's not a lot of excitement in bad things happening. There's not a lot of excitement in good things happening. It's just kind of, it goes. And the income is very predictable as long as everyone pays their bills, and the federal government doesn't come in and say that no one has to pay their rent anymore, and there's no repercussions to that because you can't be evicted or whatever. But otherwise, it's a very stable and reliable stream of income, and you get all the other benefits with it, such as no pay down, appreciation in the building, which is where we made a bunch of money, and in your depreciation of the building and your other tax deductions that you can use to offset your income. But when you get into short-term rentals, the income potential is extraordinarily higher. Now, on the one end, yes, it does usually cost more to purchase a short-term rental that is a high in desirability, because these are usually very nice buildings. You have to furnish them, which you usually don't have to do with a long-term rental. And even if you buy one that is currently furnished, a lot of times you'll have to replace some of those items, redecorate, etc. And so there's just a little bit more upfront costs with that. But the upside is that there is typically a ton more income in the short-term space. For example, the apartment building that we were renting, that we sold prior to this, which I'll leave a link to up here somewhere down in the description. We had purchased that for $80,000. It was a 3-unit building, and it made about $2,100 a month altogether with all 3 units. This is somewhere in the Midwest, so I know that you West Coasters and East Coasters are losing your mind about how low the rent is for that. But if you do the math on an $80,000 building, $2,100 a month is pretty solid. And we were a little bit under rented because we had held it through a lot of this COVID times. We were not increasing rent during those times where people were sitting on hard times. But we could have probably raised the rent another, I don't know, $300 to $500 a month total throughout the entire building. But we ended up selling that. We made a good amount of profit on it, and we purchased a cabin in Gatlinburg for $525,000. I had a walkthrough of that. I'll leave a link to that as well, so that you guys can take a look at what you get for $525,000 in the Gatlinburg market. But the difference is that we ended up in our first full month, which was July, which was a high month. We ended up grossing $11,000 and some odd dollars from that 1 month. So we made in that month almost 50% of what we would gross for the entire year in our long-term rental. Now, there were higher expenses with that. You know, the mortgage costs more, the electric costs more, because we had that obviously separate in our apartment buildings. We didn't pay anything for that. And, you know, all the utilities cost more because, for one, people are on vacation and they just don't care. They'll leave doors open, they'll turn the airway down. We have to turn over the hot tub water every time that there is a new tenant or a guest check in and out. And so there are more expenses with that, but the higher gross amount ends up putting more money in our pockets every month, just based on the way that we pay each other out, and it leaves more money in our accounts for rainy day funds and to purchase more of these short-term rentals at the end of the month. And that really is the goal, is to have more money. And really, if you look at those higher expenses that we have, that will offset a lot of the higher amount of income that we get while being able to put more money in our pockets. So just overall, in my experience with short-term rentals versus long-term rentals, is that the revenue that you get out of these is so much higher that it was a no-brainer for us to sell our long-term rentals and move into short-term rentals. Now, the second thing that I want to get into is the fun factor of these short-term rentals. When you have a long-term rental, you basically look at it more like a business. Now, both of them you have to do like businesses, but you know, you're looking for what's going to rent. You're looking to make sure that all of the stuff in there is tenant-proof, like your counters, your flooring, etc., etc. You aren't necessarily looking for a fun location for it. You want something that's relatively safe. You want the price to be right. You want it to maybe be close to schools or transit lines. You know, it's not a lot of fun. It's more of a boring business model type of thing where, you know, you're just looking to turn a profit. But the fun thing about short-term rentals is that you can buy these in your favorite vacation areas. Now, one of our favorite vacation areas is the Gatlinburg area, the Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, Smoky Mountain areas. Not necessarily for those cities, but we love the national parks, and we just love being in the mountains and those cabiny, chalet type of places. And it just happens to be that this is one of the hottest short-term rental markets in the United States, in the entire country. It's one of the top tourist destinations. It's one of the most visited national parks in the nation. And so for us to be able to take money out of our long-term rental business, put it into that short-term business, and then have an asset that we are allowed to come in and we can block off days and take our own vacations, where all we have to do then is pay for, you know, fuel, food, and entertainment to get there and back, instead of also the, you know, $1,000 or $2,000 that it would take for us to also rent a place to go down there. And, you know, granted, we do have to block those days off, so we're not making income, but the income that we make from the rest of the year, the rest of the month, the rest of the days far exceeds the losses that we take by blocking those days out. And then also, while we're at these places, we can you know, do some basic maintenance or just some freshening up of stuff. And so really you can turn almost any vacation into sort of a business vacation type of deal, which also allows you to write some things off as business expenses for your vacations. Now, the Smoky Mountains is just one area that we like to go. There are other areas that we're looking at, such as beach locations like on the Panhandle of Florida, lake locations such as Lake Cumberland in Kentucky. And that is the fun part about having these short-term vacation rentals, is that you can use them to take your vacations in and have somebody else pay for basically the entire thing, and you can own luxury homes that you likely otherwise couldn't afford. I couldn't afford to just go out and buy a $525,000 home that just sits vacant most of the time, and I would just go use it, like I'm some sort of multi-billionaire. But this is something that I can afford on a blue-collar wage, and be able to have fun in, and also to grow my wealth, and also to put a substantial amount of money in my pocket every single month, to the point where if I get enough of these, I could just go ahead and quit my job and focus strictly on these short-term rentals and some of my other projects, such as this YouTube channel and investing in the stock market, etc., etc. But let's get into the third thing that I really like about short-term rentals, and that is the difference between tenants and guests. Because when you rent out your home on Airbnb or VRBO or whatever short-term rental platform that you use, or if you use a direct booking website, doesn't matter. These folks are considered guests. When you sign a lease for someone to be in your apartment or your home for 12 months or month to month, or basically anything over 28 days, they become a tenant. And that is very important from a legal standpoint, because you see, tenants have rights, and I don't want to put my foot down on anyone. I don't try to hassle anybody, but if the landlord-tenant thing works out well and they pay the rent and you could maintain the building like you should, there's usually never any problems. But tenants can have problems. They have sometimes problems paying their rent, and then you have to take them to eviction court, and then you have to possibly have the sheriff come and set their stuff out. You have problems with them being a nuisance tenant, where they make a lot of noise, or they have pets that shouldn't be in there, or just whatever it is that you can come up with that, if you've lived in an apartment building or if you've rented to people for a while, you know what I'm talking about. There are people that are, just problems. And if you've signed a 12-month lease, a lot of times those people will be problems through the entire length of the lease, and there's not a lot that you can do about it, or if there is, it is extremely expensive and extremely time consuming. The folks that come in and rent short term, like on Airbnb and VRBO, they have no landlord-tenant rights. They are guests, and they can be basically kicked out at a moment's notice for almost anything. Now, obviously, this isn't something that you want to do, but if you do have a no pets policy and someone brings a dog, you could kick them out at any time. If they are having wild parties in your place and that's not allowed, or it's annoying the neighbors, you can just boot them. You can go there, and if they won't leave because you're there and you don't feel comfortable with that, you can call the police, and they will say, you are a guest, get out of this guy's house. There is no tenant landlord laws concerning guests in Airbnbs and VRBOs. And if you guys have trouble tenants, you guys know what I'm talking about. If you've lived in an apartment building and you've had neighbors that are trouble, and you've talked to the management companies, a lot of times they'll be like, we cannot do anything about this because of the landlord-tenant laws. And that is what makes having these short-term renters is a much better thing than having tenants. And then if you do also get one of these trouble tenants, these trouble guests, but you don't feel like kicking them out, because they still can usually review you on these platforms, and that can negatively affect your place. You're only stuck with them for a few days or a week or something like that, is the typical vacation renter time frame. So instead of being stuck with them for an entire month or an entire year, or after you've went to eviction court and you've got the set out date, even a couple months where they're in there doing whatever they want to your property, probably not paying rent, you don't have to deal with that for as long. Also, on that same note, and I know this is kind of getting long in the tooth, but I just wanted to say this, that when they check into your place as a short-term renter, you usually get your payout for that stay the next day that the next morning that they are in your place. And so you are almost always getting your money up front versus with a tenant where they could just sit there and not pay and not pay. And depending on what state you're in, it can be very hard and a very long and expensive process to get them out of your unit. So guys, those are my 3 reasons why I like short-term rentals over long-term rentals. And I've been in the long-term rental space for quite a while. And moving over into short-term rentals has been just a dramatic increase in income. It has been a dramatic increase in fun. I've already visited our Airbnb short-term rental several times, and it is a lot more fun than when I have to go down to my long-term rentals and deal with problems only. And the advantages of tenants versus guests, I cannot state that enough from a landlord's point of view, that is a big time positive for short-term rentals. Guys, if you like this, be sure to hit that like button for me. It really helps me out in the YouTube algorithm. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't yet to grow your wealth, increase your success, put you on the road to financial freedom. I appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you all in the next one.